Have you ever wondered how the turmoil in Afghanistan began, or who exactly the Taliban are? As we embark on this journey through the labyrinth of history, we unravel the enigma that is Afghanistan and the Taliban. A nation steeped in tradition, Afghanistan has a history as complex and intricate as the patterns woven into its famed rugs. In the heart of Asia, Afghanistan sits like a rough-cut gem, its beauty often obscured by the dust of conflict. Yet beyond the headlines exists a land of breathtaking landscapes and a resilient people who have weathered storms of invasions, empires, and ideologies. In the shadows of these storms, a group emerged, shrouded in mystery and controversy: the Taliban. Their name, derived from the Pashto word for students, belies a much more complex identity. The Taliban, who first appeared in the early 90s, have since become a potent symbol of the struggle for power in Afghanistan. The origin of the Taliban is a tale of political upheaval, foreign interventions, and a society grappling with the ideals of religion and governance. Their rise to power was swift, their rule was stern, and their fall was dramatic. But, as we've seen in recent times, the tale of the Taliban is far from over. This journey into the past is not merely a history lesson, it's an attempt to understand the forces that have shaped Afghanistan and the Taliban, to comprehend the roots of the current crisis. We delve into the labyrinth, not to get lost in its complexity, but to find clarity amidst the chaos. The story of Afghanistan and the Taliban is not just about conflict and power. It's about a people's quest for peace and stability, about a nation's struggle to find its place in the world. It's a story that resonates with us all, for it reflects the human condition in all its triumphs and tragedies. So hold on to your curiosity as we journey through time, unraveling the layers of history, politics, and culture that have shaped this intriguing narrative. To understand the current crisis, we must look back to the origins of the Taliban. The story of the Taliban starts in the mid-1970s. In the throes of the Cold War, Afghanistan found itself embroiled in a power struggle. As the decade wore on, the country was teetering on the brink of a devastating conflict. The Soviet Union, seeking to maintain its influence in the region, invaded Afghanistan in December 1979. Amidst this chaos, a group of Afghan Islamic fighters known as the Mujahideen emerged. With the backing of the United States and other foreign powers, they waged a guerrilla war against the Soviet forces. During this time, religious schools or madrasas across the border in Pakistan were churning out young men steeped in religious fervor and radical ideologies. Many of these young men joined the Mujahideen's ranks, bolstering their numbers and intensifying the conflict. When the Soviet Union finally withdrew in the late 1980s, it left behind a power vacuum. The Mujahideen factions, once united against a common enemy, turned on each other, plunging Afghanistan into a brutal civil war. It was in this environment of chaos and violence that the Taliban was born. The Taliban, led by Mullah Muhammad Omar, was initially welcomed by many Afghans weary of the civil war's destruction. They promised stability and rule by strict Islamic law, appealing to those desperate for order. Their ranks swelled with young men, many from those same madrasas, who saw in the Taliban a chance to bring peace to their war-torn homeland. But as the Taliban began to consolidate power, their interpretation of Islamic law led to widespread human rights abuses. Women were particularly affected, as they were barred from education and the workforce and subjected to harsh punishments. Despite international criticism, the Taliban continued to tighten their grip on Afghanistan. By the mid-1990s, the Taliban had gained control of most of Afghanistan. Yet the seeds of radicalism planted during their rise would continue to shape the country's fate for decades to come. The tale of the Taliban is a stark reminder of how foreign interventions and ideology can shape a nation's destiny. Once in power, the Taliban implemented a strict interpretation of Sharia law. Their reign, beginning in 1996, was marked by oppressive policies that severely curtailed civil liberties. Under their regime, women's rights were drastically limited. They were barred from education and employment, and their movement was heavily restricted. In fact, women were required to be accompanied by a male relative at all times in public, and their attire was strictly regulated to the point of anonymity. Violations of these rules resulted in harsh punishments, often publicly administered. The Taliban's rule was also characterized by the brutal enforcement of their interpretation of Islamic law. Public executions and amputations became commonplace, serving as a chilling reminder of the consequences of dissent. The international community reacted with widespread condemnation. Human rights organizations decried the regime's oppressive policies, but the Taliban remained largely impervious to external pressure. Then came the fateful day of September 11, 2001. The devastating terrorist attacks on American soil, orchestrated by Al-Qaeda, an ally of the Taliban, led to a seismic shift in global dynamics. The United States, backed by an international coalition, launched an invasion of Afghanistan with the objective of dismantling Al-Qaeda and toppling the Taliban regime. The Taliban's military, though formidable and well-versed in guerrilla warfare, was no match for the technologically superior coalition forces. By the end of 2001, the Taliban regime had fallen. Afghanistan was in ruins, but there was a glimmer of hope for a future free from the Taliban's oppressive rule. However, the Taliban's influence did not end with their fall from power. They retreated into the shadows, biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to re-emerge. Their story, as we will see, was far from over. The Taliban have made a startling comeback in recent years, a statement that sends shivers down the spine of many, a reality that has become the living nightmare for Afghanistan. After the fall of the Taliban in 2001, the world heaved a sigh of relief, believing the terror to be over. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, the Taliban started to regroup and rebuild, slowly but surely. During the early years of the 21st century, the Taliban was merely an echo of its former self, struggling to regain its lost power. However, things started to change around 2006, when they began to launch increasingly bold attacks against the Afghan government and its foreign allies. Slowly but surely, they started to regain lost territories, exploit the corrupt and ineffective Afghan government, and tap into the grievances of the local populace. Then came the pivotal year of 2014, when foreign troops began to withdraw from Afghanistan. This withdrawal created a power vacuum that the Taliban was quick to exploit, expanding their influence even further. As foreign troops continued to leave, the Taliban only grew stronger. Today, we find ourselves in the midst of a crisis. The Taliban has effectively taken control of Afghanistan, and the world watches in disbelief and horror. The implications of this resurgence are far-reaching and severe. For the Afghan people, it means a life under the harsh rule of the Taliban, where basic human rights are often ignored. For the world, it means a resurgence of terrorism, a threat to global peace, and a challenge to the values of democracy and human rights. But amidst all the despair, it's important to remember, history is not just about understanding the past, but also about learning from it. It's about understanding the factors that led to the resurgence of the Taliban, the mistakes that were made, and the lessons that can be learned. It's about ensuring that history does not repeat itself, that the same mistakes are not made again. The future of Afghanistan remains uncertain, but understanding its past is crucial. As we delve deeper into the history of the Taliban, we hope to gain insights that can guide us towards a more peaceful and stable future, not just for Afghanistan, but for the world. In this brief journey, we have traced the origins and evolution of the Taliban. We've examined their birth, reign, fall, and resurgence. All these stages have shaped the current crisis in Afghanistan. It's crucial to remember that the historical context we've discussed today illuminates the complexities of these events. This understanding can guide us as we navigate the ever-changing geopolitical landscape. As we continue to watch the unfolding situation in Afghanistan, remember that history often holds the keys to understanding the present.